All right, guys, welcome to my week 12 predictions. I'm going to try to breeze through this. I think there's only a few, really good games this week, in all honesty, and we're going to go over them just in order, the way that they are on ESPN. But starting off, we have Buccaneers visiting the Giants. As we all know today, the Giants released Vanilla Vic, also known as Daniel Jones, is his real name. Clearly, the Buccaneers win this game. I don't think there's much to be said. I don't even think Mike Evans needs to start. They said he may play. I don't think he needs to play. I think they rest him because Danny DeVito ain't beating this team. Who knows? Maybe Danny DeVito has some crazy connection, with the wide receivers and the offense somehow overperforms. But otherwise, I don't really see it happening. So I'm picking the Buccaneers. Moving on, we have another doozy of a game, Chiefs Panthers. Talk about a rebound game that couldn't get much easier. The Chiefs, not much to say. They're favored by 10.5. The over under is 42.5. I feel like this could be the game that sparks the offense for the Chiefs. I'm picking the Chiefs for this one. I think I think that overall, what is there to say about this game? It's the Panthers, who are 3-7 and not really playing for anything. And the Chiefs, are locked in after a loss to the Bills. Cowboys Commanders, a third doozy of a game. Dak injured for the year. Commanders, like the Chiefs, favored by 10.5. I don't really feel like we need to analyze this game. Dan Quinn returning. I'm sorry, not returning, but facing the former team he was D coordinator on. Jaden Daniels is going to expose the defense of the Cowboys because they're not very good. He's been dealing with that with the oh my goodness, the rib injury, but that hasn't really stopped him. And I can imagine that he's going to do a lot of magic on Sunday by whooping the Cowboys. Patriots Dolphins, our first somewhat interesting game. Got Drake May playing against Tua Tagovailoa for the first time. I predict this will be a matchup for many, many years because Drake May looks real, and obviously the Dolphins don't really operate without Tua. These games were tight last year, not super competitive, but they were tight score wise. I still think, however, that it's at home for the Dolphins, and they have too much firepower. And you are playing against a defense now that isn't led by Bill Belichick. I think that Mayo's gonna realize some things in this game. And it also doesn't help that they have the distraction of Jabril Peppers, where it's like, oh yeah, they just announced his court date for January. So I'm taking the Dolphins. Titans Texans, a divisional matchup for the AFC South. Titans haven't been very good this year. The Texans obviously have been. The Texans are just about full strength. The Titans and Will Levis have been doing some nice things, but they are also very banged up on defense. I think that CJ Stroud needs to start getting on track. Otherwise, it's going to look like the Texans could be a first round elimination. I think that's a little far fetched, but they haven't really been as proficient as offense as you would think going into CJ Stroud's second year. And it's interesting, they have a better run game than last year with Joe Mixon. But obviously, I'm taking the Texans. Not much to think about here with a division rival and the Texans clearly wanting to move up potentially in the seeding, which they need to really win a lot of games here at the final stretch. Lions Colts. The Colts, as we all know, beat the Jets by a point last week. Anthony Richardson looked a lot better making plays last week. The Lions, for whatever reason, needed to pulverize the team they played, who were the Jaguars, and they never pulled Goff, risking his health, in my opinion. And it's like, it doesn't really prove much to me when you're pulverizing a team that hasn't had a defense pretty much all year. So, looking at this game, as much as I'd like the Colts to, potentially pull an upset, I'm taking the Lions because I just don't think the Colts, albeit they have a disciplined defense, they just don't have what it takes to, really match up and compete score-wise with the Lions. Vikings Bears. The Bears, as we all know, getting a disappointing loss where it looked like, and me as a Packers fan, I thought we were cooked. I thought we were screwed. You get them to, 4th and 20 or whatever, or 3rd and 20, give up a pass, gets to shorter 4th down, and then they're able to convert on 4th. That Caleb Williams had to make a throw, had to do well. And to me, it's interesting. Obviously, this is, their second divisional game after losing to the Packers. And the Bears, desperately need a win. While their playoff hopes are really, really low, I do think they can capitalize on the fact that the Vikings haven't had a crazy good offense. Even since Hawkinson came back, he hasn't had a stellar game. He's had catches. But even last week, I believe that Addison and Jefferson didn't have more than 100 yards, I'm pretty sure. So they won, but it wasn't like an overall dominant offensive performance, which with a star-studded cast on the Vikings, we should expect. And I think with their O-line being somewhat banged up, I think the Bears can capitalize on that. And if they can, and my friend who's a Bears fan, thought I was crazy when I said that I think that, hey, they can beat the Vikings. So I'm actually taking the Bears in this one, even though it's an apparent upset. And the Vikings are favored by 3.5. But I'm taking the Bears. Broncos Raiders. Obviously a divisional game. The Broncos playing really, really sound football against the Falcons last week and essentially owning them the entire game, where Kirk didn't throw a single TD and got pulled. So it's wild to me that they say, the Broncos only have a 55.8% chance of winning, but they are favored by 6 points. I think that Bo Nix is playing incredible football, and that it's between him and Jaden Daniels for Rookie of the Year. And these last games are going to play a pivotal part in that. I think that it will be a slight test because, you never know in games with Max Crosby. But looking at this, I think the Broncos win. I think it's, a divisional game where they're going to really prove their dominance to a divisional opponent that they see twice a year. since they've established really their team and their quarterback is playing lights out. 49ers Packers. I'm kind of glad that I waited, to do this video because we were unsure of Purdy, we were unsure of Bosa, even Trent Williams with an injury, but he's playing. And then you look at Kittle, and I think that he's playing this week. So essentially, with Purdy and Bosa, both out of the game, two of their top players, this is going to have to be a game where McCaffrey, Kittle, and Debo carry the game, and Jawan Jennings, or Ricky Pearsall. And they are up against a battered defensive back room in the Packers because Jair Alexander has also been ruled out with his knee injury, which is unfortunate. Obviously, we go back to last year in the divisional round, and the Niners came back and won that game against the Packers. But this time, I mean, they're without Purdy, they're without obviously Ayuk. They are, and then, you take out Bosa, who played a pivotal role at the end of that game. I just think that they don't have enough talent to stop the Packer offense. A Packer offense that is hungry to really dominate this banged up 49ers team. And it's like, while our defense didn't play the greatest last week, I think it's going to be a game where they're going to be fired up and ready to dominate these Niners because they're going to remember last year. So I'm taking my Packers, of course, because I think that we can have a dominant win here and nearly a 70% chance for victory is what they're saying at this point. Moving on, we have Cardinals Seahawks, probably one of the more relevant games this week. Albeit neither of these teams have been like winning, the majority of their games, obviously. Being in the division that every team is 5-5 besides the 6-4 Cardinals. We obviously just talked about the Niners and a crazy tight division. Now, I think the Cardinals, because they have a good run game and because Kyler Murray, does a lot of good things, I think they can go in and beat Seattle. I think that Seattle has, last week they did perform better against a Niners team that obviously they were banged up. They got a little banged up during the game last week, which helped the Seahawks, I think. But I think against the Cardinals, who are just looking kind of like a really scrappy and feisty team, I think that the Cardinals do win this game. Sorry, Seattle. This would be a really good week for you to win a game because I think that, you look at other teams in the division, the Niners likely to lose and the Rams as well, who we'll talk about in a second, but I just don't see it happening, to be honest with you. I think that Cardinals are playing a lot better than anticipated, and they are not a team to really be trifled with, and they've been good, pretty good on the road. 2-2 isn't, anything crazy good, but it's good enough to where it's like I think that they lose to the Cardinals. Moving on to Eagles Rams. The Eagles visiting the Rams in LA. The Eagles obviously have been playing, very good football. I still think the jury is kind of out on them. I think that when a team plays them tough, if they don't stall out on offense, that they can still lose games. I think that people know what the Eagles are about. They're about running the football and then doing the tush push in short yardage situation. And if a team can sustain drives, like I think the primary game that I give this example of was the Commanders, and the Commanders were doing well most of the game, stopping the Eagles. They just couldn't score offensively. which left their defense out on the field to the point where the Eagles ran away with it at the end. But if they play a team that has a good offense, and doesn't, give up a lot of yards, that's disciplined, much kind of like the Rams. The Rams are a very balanced defense, I think, where it's like they don't have a lot of star talent, but they're not exactly getting killed every game that they play. And then you look at the offense. I think Stafford, is as good as any quarterback right now. Nobody's really talking about him too much. And that sort of thing, but it's like Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp are definitely the two kind of guys that are like, how are we supposed to defend both of them every single play? Like one of them is gonna get open. And this game, obviously, I'm giving it to Philadelphia just because I think they have a good amount of talent, and I think it is harder to play against them. And I think that their secondary is getting better and better. But I wouldn't be surprised if it was a close game because Stafford can sling it a lot better than Hurts can. Moving on to the Harbaugh Bowl for Monday night. Obviously, Ravens Chargers. I remember these Harbaugh Bowls when it was Niners Ravens. And I mean, they weren't very often, obviously, because they were different conferences. But it always seemed to me that Baltimore almost always won those. And I see no reason really to go against them. I do think that the Chargers are on the precipice of being able to contend with a team like the Ravens, but I think the Ravens are going to realize that last week they were too cute against the Steelers, who are also a tough defense. And I think the Ravens are going to go in here and they're going to be able to play really, really well against the Chargers. And the Chargers aren't going to have an answer for Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. So, with this game for Monday night, I'm going to take the Ravens, obviously, but I think it's going to be a hell of a game, to be honest with you. And I think it's, more than fitting at this point in the year that we have a Monday night game that is of this caliber, especially before Thanksgiving week, which should be interesting too. Obviously, given the fact that there's 8 teams playing on Thursday and Friday. And then you have, the regular Sunday games and then Monday Night Football. But with that being said, if you guys have any thoughts, opinions, or takes, I would love for you to comment on them and for us to have a discussion in the comments. But if you like this content and you want to see more of it, leave a like, a comment, and subscribe because I release videos twice a week on Tuesday and Friday typically. Next week might be different because it's a holiday week, but as always, I'm your host, Cassidy Streeter, and go Pack Go.